And I think the biggest misconception is once you've picked your niche,
Yeah.
like there's no competition now.
If you're 7 out of 10 happy with your name, with your logo, then just keep moving forward and build something good.
Tell me the story.
Okay,
We'll just get cracking.
tell your story first, your mate. So I've got, for any listeners, I've got the new Dre Power Beats Pro because my headphones got too sweaty and I wanted some that I could use to work out and play basketball in. And
Is that why the sweat reasons?
well, no. So basically, I bought these like 50 quid ones off Amazon. They're called like Tautronics or something. Like they're like clearly some Chinese knockoff of whatever. But they were really good. I would recommend them. But playing basketball in them, the foam just got sweaty. And I know I could replace the foam, but I was like, oh, I'm just going to Google it. And then I spent like too long on Google looking at reviews of headphones. And the exhaustion of that made me go with the brand power of Beats / Apple, because Apple now know Beats, which is going to become relevant later on in the podcast as we are talking about brand today. So
We are.
But Johnny
Beats
had
by Dre.
about his
They're
friend.
not by.
Well,
Yeah. So
not by
just
Dre.
someone I know. I was learning that Alex didn't know what the Town Moor was, which anyone who's in Newcastle will be amazed. Big field, huge field in Newcastle, right in the middle. And my friend who just bought similar headphones, was on a dog walk, pulled a poo bag out of his pocket with a headphone without realising. Headphones on the ground, somewhere in the Town Moor. Realises when he gets home, decides to go back out again, retraces all of his steps, finds a headphone.
See,
Amazing.
and I have a very similar story to that of retracing steps. And I think that's one of the things I think, we can talk about like big life successes, but moments like that, so the moment that I know what it felt like when he retraced his steps. He had 20,000 steps, did you say? So
Yeah.
to find an individual headphone. Now, like, you can look at that in terms of efficiency and all this jazz. Doesn't matter, because the feeling when it's so, you feel amazing. So I had this thing that happened to me in uni where I was doing an all-nighter, finishing an essay, and for anyone that's done an all-nighter, that kind of delirious when it's like the sun's come up at this point, and you're finalizing your paper, and it was it had gone that late that the cleaners were then coming round and cleaning the library. So I had my snacks that I'd helped survive me the night, like some Lunchables or something, and I'd finished those. They'd gone about 1 a.m., 2 a.m. or something like that. And I had my like little iPod next to them. And so the cleaner comes around. I'm kind of just lost in the essay. I've got into a groove now. I've got to bang out the final few hundred words. And the cleaner comes around. I kind of don't notice them. They're sort of there, but whatever. And then I look and my iPod is gone. And I'm like, I'm a kind of person that loses things quite easily. So there was a kind of psychological, this again. But it's gone. And so I look in my bag. I'm like, where have I put it? And obviously, like, at this point, I'm delirious. I'm like half awake. And I'm just panicking. I'm like, oh my God. Where could it be? And I think back, do the similar thing that your friend did and like retrace the steps. And I'm like, it's in the fucking trash. The woman has put it in the bin. The cleaner has taken the iPod and cleaned it up with my things. And then I went a level deeper of rethinking the steps. I went, okay, what was in that trash bag? What was in the bin bag that I had? I remember it was a clear plastic bag. So I remembered that about it. And then I'm like, okay, maybe I can talk to the cleaners and, do that. So I go to find the cleaners. I'm now like walking around each floor of the library looking for the cleaning staff. I'm like, have you seen my iPod? Now, they don't get paid enough to really care about whether or not they swept up my iPod. And some of them didn't have great English. So like trying to communicate that they had put my iPod in the bin and where might those bin bags be was really, really difficult. because they were just like, I don't understand. Yes, I clean. Yes, I clean. Like they did a lot of that conversation, and I'd be like, yes, I know you clean, but they just didn't get it. So then I'm like, again, still delirious, still like, is this really happening? I'm not quite sure. And I think, okay, what can I realistically do to try and get my iPod? There's a lot of stuff on there. There's a lot of notes on there, and I hadn't synced it up to the cloud at this point. This was a few years back before I was savvy to all of that stuff. Oh my God, what do I do? Like half my life's on this thing. Um, so I ended up following one of the cleaners, like literally behind them, sort of like trying to keep my distance so I didn't get rumbled, following them to where the bin bags were, and then like all the bin bags hadn't been taken away yet, thankfully. So they were just kind of like, it's a big library, 7 or 8 floors. So there's like 100 bags. But luckily, most of them are kind of see-through. But I look back in my memory, like, okay, what snacks did I have over the course of writing this essay? So I've got these 100 bags, they're all see-through in front of me. What snacks did I have? I was like, okay, so, there was a Monster Energy drink, there was the Lunchables, they had like a pasty, there's probably, a few other things, an Oasis, I think I probably had at some point in the night. And I'm like scanning these bags, like, oh, that one looks like it could be it. So this is now, it's broad daylight. People are now going to work. And they just see me dressed, like clearly just looking frazzled and tired, rummaging through bin bags. But I found it. It was in this bin bag. And so really, the retracing your steps method is incredibly effective and so satisfying. I think the more steps there are for you to retrace, the more satisfying it is.
Do you find that, like, as you're looking bin bag to bin bag, the thoughts become more and more catastrophic, and you start like, I'm gonna have to buy like a new iPod's gonna cost it. Like, I was all those songs on there that I'll not be able to get back, and then you find it, and you're like, and all of that goes away.
I think I literally cheered. I was like, yes! to anyone walking by going to work, just this weird lanky kid rummaging bins, going, yeah!
Yeah. I have one more story which is similar to that. Keep it very brief, and then we'll actually talk about the subject. But essentially, day of exams in accounting due to finish, me and 2 other friends, actually the same guy who found his headphone, due to go to Vegas for first time we'd ever have been to Vegas, like big holiday, all like incredibly excited about it. Sat in the office, like next day we're due to go. Someone said to me, you better not have lost your passport. And you're like, oh, fuck. Yeah, that thought of, actually, good point, like, where is my passport? And then all these memories of like, oh, actually, I had to scan it for something, so it was in my work bag. And that morning, I'd put a bunch of like confidential paper in the confidential waste bin that's locked, that you can't get in, in the office. So I like left the office immediately. I was like, looked in my bag, couldn't find my passport. Went home, looked in my bedroom, couldn't find my passport. Same process, like, oh my God,
Panic.
It's in the confidential waste bin,
Yeah.
where everything gets shredded.
Yeah.
Like, so, and it gets cleaned regularly because it's obviously confidential waste. Got back, had to get like the facilities management of the building to come into the room and open up the bin. Everyone in the office, like the partners are there, like to look at what I'm doing. Passport's not in the bin.
Oh. Oh no.
Turns out it was just in my bedroom.
That's another one. I mean, as I said, I'm quite experienced with losing stuff. Like when you become fixated on the location it should be.
It's in there.
It's definitely in there, and then it's just like under like a bed sheet, and you just made
it. It was just under. It was under another stack of paper. But because it's quite thin, you like look at a stack of paper on the thing and it looks like it's flush, and you think, well, I'm not going to go through every paper because it's in the paper bin at work.
Exactly.
And like it being under there doesn't fit with what I think's happening, so I need to go back.
Everyone was watching you, and
But then you have to deal with, so like, because the nastiest side effect of this was, because I was going on holiday the next day, I had all this work I had to do to get over the line before the next day. But actually what I'd done was spend the entire afternoon not doing any of that work and just creating fuss for the sake of it when it was home all along.
Yeah.
So if there's a lesson to learn from that, it's that we need to talk about branding.
Exactly. Well, exactly. We wouldn't have been. Well, I mean, Passport is not a brand, but
It's kind of my brand. It's my personal brand.
but in the eyes of the government. But no, in terms of branding, we were all looking for things that were valuable to us, and we paid good money for them because of the brand that they were.
Exactly that.
And this is the start of a series basically called how to start an online fitness business. And one of the first things you need to consider is your brand, and then in relation to your brand, your niche. And we're going to talk about both of those things today because they're they're very much a key element of the online side of things, which doesn't feel as obvious when you're doing kind of in-person personal training. And I think it's something that we find to be the big divider in terms of who manages to find success online, essentially.
Yeah. So I've actually just had a conversation with someone about why we are called Propane Fitness.
Yeah.
And the short answer is there isn't really a reason, other than like it was initially a joke that got seriously out of hand.
All of this is all of this.
Yeah, this is all still just linked up to a joke that I made 10 years ago. But yeah, I think like when people think of brand, they think name, logo, and then they probably start thinking of like website, what my website looks like. Do I need a business card if I'm going to be an online fitness professional? And then like, do I need my offline brand to be different to my online brand? Should it be my name or should it be a logo? All these questions. If only we knew. I haven't got a clue. So if only we knew. If only we knew the answers.
But I think that's so when and then when someone comes to like creating the business, I don't know. I think it might be a hangover from like movie scenes where like the name, like the name of your business, especially at the start, just doesn't matter at all, really, as long as it's not completely misleading or just like a massive turn off to your target audience. Like, they're the only two things that really matter that much. Like Propane Fitness is not you could so having Propane Fitness being successful, you could do the post analysis of, well, oh yes, propane, flames, fire, ignite, burning, health, fitness. Like you could do all that, and like there's some value in that, but there's also basically none. Like that's overthinking at that point.
Yeah.
It's just the only reason it's a good name, or like it seems like a good name, is because the business is a good business, and the name kind of doesn't it doesn't turn people away. It doesn't make people think, oh my God, what that,
this whole thing, like it's fascinating to me that when I see like clients in a testimonial say like, since I've been with Propane, I'm like, take that sentence in isolation, completely meaningless. Like, what a weird thing to say. I'm looking forward to continuing with Propane. Like, what does that mean? But I think the whole point is people get really stuck at this level, at this stage of like, what am I going to call my thing? And the fact that like our business name means absolutely nothing really. Like propane burns at a very low temperature. It's purple. It's usually involved in like patio heaters and that sort of thing. Like it's a very non-exciting. It's not even used for barbecues all the time. It doesn't even cut that. Like when I suggested it, I was like, surely that's involved in some kind of like jet engine propulsion, like big explosions.
Yeah.
And actually it's like a really safe commercial gas that's like used for very non-exciting, very safe things. So like we're called that, and then in spite of that, people start to just say it in a sentence, and it starts meaning something.
That's where having a brand name becomes important. So it's not the specificity of what the name actually is, but you need language to help people understand bigger ideas and bigger collections of ideas on like a philosophical level. Like that's why language is so important. That's why humans managed to beat out all other species, was because they were able to use language to communicate complex concepts in shorter periods of time. essentially. And
Yeah.
propane, with propane, what that propane, when the coaches we work with are using, that's in relation to everything that they've experienced with the business, and they can then just shorten that to propane. So that's why it needs to happen, because people need to be able to communicate what you do effectively to other people, and you need to be able to communicate effectively what you do, and you need something simple to be able to unify that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, completely. So like the take home from that is it doesn't really matter as much as you'd think. Like it matters that it is something,
It matters that you
but it
have
doesn't
one
matter
thing.
what
So yeah,
what that is.
what
Yeah.
that is, as long as it's not an appalling turn off. Like, you know,
Yeah.
if it was like terrorist health, like obviously that's not going to appeal to people. Like,
Or even like patio cleaning,
yeah,
or
exactly,
like something that is not fitness.
exactly.
That someone like looks at it and thinks, "What's that?"
So if you look at all of like the big businesses, people might overthink like, oh, Starbucks. Oh, what's the? If we look at the kind of linguistic of the syllables on like Starbucks was initially called Starbucks Tea and Spices. Like that's all it was, and it sold tea and spices. Like
Isn't it? Isn't Starbucks the name of a mermaid?
it's no, it's in the so it's from Moby Dick, and it's one of I think
That's it.
it's one of the shipmates in Moby Dick on the Pequod. I think I'm pretty sure, but yeah. So it's just and nobody knows that, and nobody cares about that. They care about the service that Starbucks offers, but because they have that name, that's kind of yeah, it's individual to them. But that's down the line for you as well. Like the only
Yeah.
reason that people can call it propane now, as opposed to propane fitness, is because there's a lot more brand power behind it that's built up over years of doing things and helping people.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. And like it then starts to become in like Starbucks level.
Yeah,
It starts to become a language by itself. Like, oh, should we get a Starbucks
yeah,
instead of should we get a coffee?
exactly.
Starbucks, as you say, like it's a collection of things that may mean any of Starbucks products. And Starbucks it specifically are actually a really good example because they then created like they popularized fancy coffee, didn't they? And
Yeah,
made like the Frappuccino and lots of different things that didn't necessarily exist before, which is like brand like the Frappuccino is a brand in itself almost.
yeah,
But yeah, like they're just words to describe ideas. And so if you think of it like that, then almost takes the pressure off a little bit.
yeah,
But I think the most common question we get is, well, the two most common questions on brand specifically are, should it be the same offline and online,
hmm,
and should it be like Johnny Fitness, or should it be a business name?
yeah,
Like because people have seen like Joe Wicks, or I suppose a lot of people who are very much in the public eye are a single. It's like James Smith PT.
yes.
So a lot of people have copied the PT add-on to their name, and that becomes their brand. So, what do you think about that?
I think it depends on what you're like. What are you selling, and what's well? So so with you and you and Yusuf, for example, like you needed to have a unifying name because Yusuf and Johnny Fitness, eh, you know what I mean?
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Whereas
yeah,
like propane is a bit more, and it's a tough one. And again, the answer comes back to it doesn't actually matter too much at the start. Um, so then you have like Mike Israel and Nick Shaw, their Renaissance periodization. That's a brand name. Or P90X, for example. You know, that's what's his name,
yeah.
Sean. I think it's Sean, isn't
I
it?
don't know.
Yeah.
I know who you mean. That yeah,
So
doing all right.
yeah, and the only reason that they so like James Smith PT is only available as a brand because he's like carved a niche out as to who he is, if that makes sense. And
Yeah,
that's the thing with naming it after yourself. You have to be a unique angle in the market to be able to do that. Otherwise, well, you don't. Again, you sort of don't have to either. It's if that's something that you're stressing, you're not stressing the right things in your business. I think,
yeah,
especially if you haven't launched it. And this
yeah,
episode is
yeah,
about how to start it. And so if you don't have an idea that comes to your head in like 10 minutes of brainstorming, then maybe just go for your name and PT. Or, say you, for example, you're a swim coach, Matt Rhodes swim coach, whatever the hell that would be. I've made up that name. But yeah.
Someone Matt Rhodes will be out there listening, going like,
Oh my
"Oh my god,
shaking.
I never thought I should be doing swim coaching." I think So like at the time, the reason we didn't go with Johnny and Yusuf Fitness,
Yeah.
aside from the fact that it sounds shit, is that we were copying like T Nation
Mhm.
and bodybuilding.com, and I suppose like a lot, it wasn't as trendy, like not as many people were doing it.
Yeah.
We didn't know anyone else who was doing it, so we didn't, and like Instagram didn't exist, so the the like the view into the world of other people trying it wasn't there, and it felt like, well, was trying to start a business, and businesses normally have names.
Yes.
Like you don't, it's quite rare apart from like sole traders, maybe, like individual shops like takeaways or news agents. You
Yeah.
don't like go down the high street and see the businesses being called the name of the person who founded them, right? Like it's normally called something, and then
Yeah.
there's a business owner. And I think like I like to. I mean, we didn't have this thought at the time, but I think the benefit of it is like other people have been able to help us. Like
Yes.
Alex is now a coach in the propane brand of stuff that we do, and someone doesn't sign up with us and think, oh shit, like I thought I was going to speak to Johnny from Johnny and Yusuf Fitness. It's like there's a brand that other people can be part of and still be part of the brand and still help the brand, and it's like separate to us in a way, which I prefer, because it's less like if Yusuf goes out and does something really horrendous in public and gets like
Last
cancelled
Yusuf.
on, yeah, which he probably will, like it's a matter of time. It's not necessarily going to affect. It's not going to affect the brand.
Yeah.
It just affects his personal brand. So yeah, I think like it's probably harder to build a business brand that's separate to you initially,
Yes.
because online, I think people hold businesses at arm's length sometimes.
Yes. Definitely.
Because the natural assumption is, well, they're trying to sell to me. Otherwise, what are they doing? Like, why
Well,
is a
yeah.
business posting if it's not trying to sell?
It becomes the weird thing of like they were still buying from, fitness clients are still buying from you as opposed to, well, they're buying from what you and Johnny, not what you and Johnny, what you and Yusuf represent in as like in the propane brand. So it becomes like a weird conversation. But for the sake of, I think the sake of ease for anyone listening who's like, okay, I'm getting started out. How do I get started?
Yeah,
If you want to go like long term and you want to have employees down the line, and that's something that you envision for your future, probably have a business name. And even if you, and it also protects you about like if you want to change industries down the line, and you're like, oh, okay, I don't want to do the general population anymore. I want to really nail in on whatever. Then it becomes a bit of a, like Joe Wicks. If Joe Wicks wanted to become like a power athlete, it would be quite difficult. Well, actually, it wouldn't be difficult because he has so many followers. But you know what I mean? It becomes like it's more of a like he has to maintain that brand all the time, which in a way becomes like a bit of a trap slightly. Whereas if you can keep those things separate, you do allow yourself space away from the business and space to be yourself outside of the business as well.
yeah. All right, so he's a good example as well, because he's got like his own kitchenware range. He's got a book. He's got a program. He appears on podcasts separately, TV separately. So like a way that you can use. I completely agree. Like I think this episode specifically in these topics, I think the thing to take away from all of this stuff is this is where most people get like bogged down in the details and overthink
Yeah,
things
we're,
and never
we're
get.
getting bogged down in the details.
We are, yeah, but we're
Like-
getting bogged down so that other people don't have to. I think that's the
Exactly.
distinction. So, like, do not overthink brand. And as Alex is saying, like, just go with your own name, because you can go with your own name and then still have a separate business. So, like, if you look at Yusef on Twitter, he's Yusef on Twitter. Like, if people never say to me, oh, I saw, it looks like Propane's really angry on Twitter at the moment. They always say, it looks like Yusef's really angry on Twitter at the moment. So it's like he's a personal brand promoting the business. Which is separate. It's a separate thing, but it's functionally it's the same. It's like if you use your own name, you can always change it. Like call your business something in the future, call your program something in the future. It doesn't have to be, what was the name? Matt Rhodes. Matt Rhodes PT. Matt Rhodes swim coach, and the Matt Rhodes swim coach 6-week program. Like you can call it something. You can call it something else. Maybe Matt Rhodes 6-week swim coach program becomes like Swim Quick. And it's like swim quick limited.
Swim with Mad Rag.
Swim quick. Yeah. So that's, I would say like,
and I think this is the other thing of like where, well, there's a couple of things off the back of that, or where like brand in understanding your brand, the first thing you have to understand, and the first thing we would advise that you figure out in relation to moving forward with starting this business would be your niche. And that's very informative of your brand. And once you're there, I think a lot of the clouds lift in terms of like, oh, what should I name this? Oh, should I copy Matt Rhodes and his swim coach business? Like, what should I do? It becomes a lot.
I really hope, is Matt Rhodes based on anything?
I don't know. No,
No. I really hope someone called Matt Rhodes is listening.
Um,
That'd just be the weirdest experience.
but yeah. So in terms of, once you figure out your niche, and by niche we just mean the target market that you want to serve, and that your expertise will be best suited to serving and helping them solve their problem. Once you figure out all of that, the brand stuff becomes like this second order consequence of that. That's like, it shouldn't be the thing that you start with, because you have nothing to go off, and because it's going to change as you grow anyway. And as the business grows, and as you see what people respond to, you're going to change up certain elements. And if you try and plan it all before you start moving, it's like someone trying to it'd be like an explorer, and instead of going into the jungle, they guess what the jungle might look like, and they talk about other jungles, and they're like, you have to go into the jungle, and you have some best practices for exploring this jungle, and you have some ways of doing it, but you just have to go in it. You have to start moving, and then you have to react based on what's happening. And it's very much the same with trying to create something, and in this case, creating a business, creating an online personal training business. You have to get the thing moving. So getting hung up on trying to plan out your brand before it's actually in motion doesn't make any sense.
Especially when it comes to building a program, because that's like, the only reason we have survival advice for being lost in the jungle is because at some point somebody got lost in the jungle.
Yes.
And they were like, "Whoa, shit! Like, actually, I'm encountering all these problems." And like, maybe they didn't make it, and then maybe the next person did, and over time you come up with this, like, okay, this is the best way to survive in a jungle. So it's like, if you're trying to help people, trying to help a specific person by guessing based on your knowledge and your expertise, like, I think this might be what the person wants, is maybe they'll respond to this marketing message, and maybe this is the name I should call it, this is the brand, this is the coloring. Like, it's way easier to just get people into the program and let them tell you. So that comes back to like, well, who is that person going to be? And this is another, so like, if we look at the journey of people through our program, yeah, they kind of like, they come up with their name and they're really excited, they get their logo, and then often they get caught in niche, yes, as this big, like, and I think the biggest misconception is once you've picked your niche, yeah, like, there's no competition now. It's like, like men between the ages of 35 and 37 called Matt Rhodes, who are looking to lose weight. They like, no one else is trying to target them. Yeah. But it's not really. It doesn't really matter, because Matt may well be in that range of people, but he's also part of 10 other niches, if you define it slightly differently, being targeted by thousands of other coaches targeting each one of those niches. So it's like, well, who's Matt going to pick as a coach? It's just the person who like says something or communicates with him in a way that just, he's like, oh yeah, that looks interesting.
Well, exactly.
That makes sense to me.
And this is where it all this ends up, it's all connected to, everything's connected to everything in a business. There's no like thing that's just siloed off on, there's not like you have the brand name and that doesn't affect anything that happens, and you have the niche, and like, it's all connected, and you're working with this kind of thing that's also interacting with a market. So sort of in relation to kind of your brand and your niche, like you said, that the person in that market who's going to win out is the person who speaks to that person the most. Now, obviously the example you used of like Matt Rhodes is between 35 and 37. That niche is probably slightly too small. And well, maybe it's not. Maybe Matt Rhodes is a fairly common name, but in terms of like, if you were trying to build a business to run for several years, you might quickly saturate the Matt Rhodes market.
But so I think the bigger problem with that example is, so I use this example with people when I'm discussing this with them on like the enrollment call into the program, is they'll say like, I really want to go after busy professionals.
Yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, like Soda, thousands of other coaches at the
Yes.
moment. Like that's the propane fitness market is that.
Hmm.
But like a lot of my friends are busy professionals, and if I were to like line them up and say, right, here's a program for all of you, it would literally be like in that group of people, there are people who have never touched a barbell,
Yeah.
and there's a guy who deadlifts like 280 kilos in the 83 kilo weight class, like all busy professionals.
Yes.
So it's a specific niche. They're all within a year of each other. They all work the same job. They're all in the same industry, but the problem that they all have is very different, and the goal that they all have is very different. And I think that's what's more important when it comes to niche selection. It's like they could all be scrolling through Instagram at 9 p.m. on a Friday
Yeah.
and stop at totally different things.
Definitely.
But by this like traditional niche definition, they are the same niche.
Well, exactly. And I think this delves into something like the psychographics and demographics. So, demographics. So with the Matt Rhodes example, people named Matt Rhodes is a demographic. That's like a statistic that you could like draw up and say this is the number of people that are called that on their government, certificate or whatever. Um, so that doesn't really help you in terms of a brand or in terms of helping someone, because people called Matt Rhodes have a billion different problems. Okay, and
Yeah.
then you narrow it. So then you narrow it to people called. Okay, we'll get rid of the Matt Rhodes qualifier. But then I think that's where people sometimes think they're niching down more, is with stuff that doesn't actually inform their attitudes, and that's where psychographics comes in, which is all about like the beliefs, the kind of taste profile of someone. Like, oh, are they really into action movies? Are they do they believe in minimalism, or are they quite like decadent with their life? What and this is where the propane fitness brand succeeded, because it targeted people that, yes, they're in that range of friends that you were talking about, but you niched in on an extra demographic, which was that kind of finance professionals. So you could speak to that as well, because you were finance professionals at the time. You also there's kind of an attitude thing of like, they probably had a little bit of experience with a barbell, so closer towards that kind of, well, your mate that could deadlift 280 kilos, not quite there, but in between that and the person who never goes to the gym. And then on top of that, you have people that are very analytical, which is kind of already in there with the finance professional thing, because people don't generally do that who aren't analytical.
Yeah.
But it's about creating basically a niche that is specific in attitude, specific in kind of experience, but is also broad enough that the market's not going to be tiny. It
Yeah.
wasn't just
Yeah.
it wasn't that those people that lived in Jesmond. It was
Who are really interested in angling and fishing on a Friday evening and
exactly.
go to, yeah, like obviously you can make a niche so specific that it just has one person in,
Yeah.
like you can do that. But I think like niches, the fundamental reason why you pick a niche is you want to sell something to someone. So like, why does someone buy something? Well, they have a problem or a goal, and then they have like a set of preferences, as you were saying, they have like a taste profile around that. So if I'm going to sell, I decide, right, I'm going to sell fitness fat loss coaching to somebody, like who do I know the most about in terms of that struggle? Like who do I have the most understanding of? What are they going to struggle with? Well, I know things like, like the Friday night beer pressure to go out for a beer
Yeah.
in the pub over the road is like ever present for anybody who's ever worked in a, probably any job, to be honest, any like busy job where there's a Friday night finish and everyone's like worked towards a deadline. But in finance, it's a big thing. So a lot of entertaining goes on. And there's a lot, like most people are very stressed and or don't like their job, so they drink to get around that. But that's a very specific. So like I can use that in my marketing. I can use the office canteen. I can use the taking out a protein shake when you get to the office and someone's saying something about like, oh, what's that for? There's all these kind of nuances that I've just experienced and Yusuf's experienced, that means that if that person is going to pick a coach to work with, are they going to pick a PT who's never experienced that before?
Yeah.
Or are they going to pick someone who like gets it? Like, and this is the same thing with 20-year-old guys who are working with new mums. Like, they can do that. There's no reason why they can't do that. But if you don't know anything about them, and there's another PT was a mum 3 years ago for the first time, and got through it with certain fitness approaches, they're going to win the attention game. Like, they're going to win that person's business over the 20-year-old.
Unless the 20-year-old is like so hot to the mum, but that's a different.
Well, that's a different thing completely.
Different thing. But, yeah. No, I totally agree with that. Like, and it's always it's a balance, and business is very much about balancing the extremer ends. I think people have this idea of either like you're gonna have to post 1 million times to social media, or it's nothing. There's no, nothing. Or like you have to serve everyone, or you serve no one. Like, oh, you have to serve one really specific person, or you don't. You know, it never works like that, and that's not how it works in practice. You even when you get down to quite specific things, you generally share a lot of commonalities with people. And it's also worth remembering that the niche you pick is not going to be all of your clients ever in an online space, you know. And there's the niche you pick and the niche you create your content towards, and then this is going to come later on in this series, but there's like Facebook ads, and you can't run that exactly to that niche because the technology is not there for you to specify that person exactly. But you go for the best practice of who you think is going to be broadly close to that niche, 1 or 2 degrees close to that niche. That pool of people is bigger, and you're also still going to attract some of those people as well. It's not only, Propian Fitness, although you wrote it basically for the younger version of you and Yusuf, appeals to a much broader audience. It's kind of counterintuitive because it's some people that have literally nothing in common with you, really. But the specificity of what you write and when you write about stuff that is you've actually experienced, or not, you don't necessarily have to experience it yourself, but stuff that you have like a deep understanding of, people will gravitate towards that, whether or not it's exactly what's going on with them as well. And that's another big thing of kind of
Well, I think that people worry about that when they're picking a niche, because they're like, oh my god, like if I decide to only work with finance professionals who are in their 30s, what if there's not enough of those people? And it's like we have worked with a massive spectrum of clients over the years. We were explained this idea by a business coach like years ago, and I remember hearing it at the time thinking like, that doesn't make any sense. But he was like, you'll find that you set up a shop selling apples, and one day someone comes and says, you got any bananas, mate? And you go, no, but I come back tomorrow, I'll get you a banana. And then you have bananas, and then someone comes in and says, have you got any oranges? And before you know it, you're like a mango expert, or like a watermelon expert. Yeah. And like, actually the idea of selling apples was like, God, remember 5 years ago when we used to only sell apples? And like, you just find that the people that you work with who you resonate with the most, or you get the best results with, will probably evolve and change over time a little bit as you change and evolve over time as a coach. Yeah. So the most important thing really is like, if you had to sell to anybody, if you've got to like get in touch with a group of people today and you've got to sell to them, like who might immediately see you as an expert? Who's going to not have the question of like, who the fuck are you? Why should I listen to you?
Yeah.
It's probably someone who's a little bit behind you in the journey, who's like maybe not quite where you are yet. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to have like bigger biceps than them. You just have to have like solved the problem that they're trying to solve. Like, what do those people have in common? What problem do they have? What goal do they want? Try and sell your stuff to them, and like the rest will figure it out. Stuff will figure itself out over the years. But that person who does that will always beat the person who spends a year worrying about, should my logo be purple or blue? Yeah. Or like, should I be like Matt Rhodes PT, or should I be Swim Quick Limited?
Exactly. So yeah, that's the thing, and that's why this branding conversation really veered off into the world of niche, because your niche will inform all of your branding in a much more natural way than you trying to do it any other way around. And also just to understand, like Johnny said, like if you're 7 out of 10 happy with your name, with your logo, then just keep moving forward and build something good. Yes.
And if anybody takes the name Swim Quick Limited, we will sue you faster than you know what's happened.
Yes, so. I'll get my lawyers on you. And me and Matt Rhodes will see you in court.
Have we done it?
Yeah.
Do you think that's it? There's nothing else to say?
That's a great outro line.
Have we done it?
Yeah.
Is it finished? Can I go now? What's next in the series, Alex? Why should I... If I'm sat there thinking like, this podcast was a bit boring, I'll probably not wait for the next one. Why should I wait and listen to the next episode?
Well, so in the next episode, we're going to talk about the kind of the next step. So launch, what surrounds a launch of a product, what surrounds all of this kind of stuff. What do you need to have in place to launch your thing? Because after listening to this, you should, you've figured out a niche by then. So come back next week and we'll talk about launching it.
The launch strategy that GPs don't want you to know. Doctors hate them for revealing this secret launch strategy.
This middle-aged mum from a fishing town figured out a perfect launch strategy that doctors hate,
and now makes £300 an hour working from home, or whatever.
Exactly. Yes. So that's.
But yeah, I mean, it is just like the most systematic, simple way of launching possible.
Exactly.
And like we're just going to explain the whole thing for free in the next episode. So how's that for a hook? Boom. Right, we'll see everybody on the next episode.
Goodbye.